Good morning, everybody. Today we are facing a Mayday situation, and I'm here to send an SOS call to Congress and the American people because we're on the verge of a transportation government shutdown. The Highway Trust Fund is facing an unprecedented financial crisis. The trust fund is the major source of funding for our surface transportation system, paying for highways and bridges and buses and trail and transit rail systems and more. It's on the verge of bankruptcy, and Congress needs to act now. The law authorizing our transportation programs, MAP 21, expires on September 30th, and without action to extend the trust fund, all payments to the states stop on October 1. David, could you pull that back a little so I can see what you're putting up? This shows you on September 30th, we have no more authority to spend anything out of the trust fund. But even if we reauthorize our surface transportation programs, the Highway Trust Fund is short $18 billion for 2015 and $100 billion over the next 6 years. If we do not come up with additional revenues for the first time in our nation's history, we will not be able to fund any new projects. Our crisis begins in July, when payments to the states will be slowed due to dangerously low levels in the Highway Trust Fund. The balance falls below minimum threshold and payments to states slow down. Jobs are lost. Because of the lack of action in Congress, DOT Secretary Fox sent a letter to the state departments of transportation last week to inform them that the situation is dire. In this letter, Secretary Fox wrote, I don't know if we have those charts, David, with Secretary Fox or not. If we don't, I can just read them. It's okay. He wrote, quote, "The balance of the trust fund's account will likely dip below a critical threshold at which the U.S. DOT must begin to implement cash management procedures." And for those of you who don't know what cash management procedures means, it means a slowdown in reimbursements. If the trust fund, he continues, becomes insolvent, DOT will likely need to delay reimbursements owed. We understand and regret that such measures may be necessary as the current season for construction is ongoing. We have and will continue to sound the alarm bell that hundreds of projects and thousands of jobs are at risk. Ladies and gentlemen, the Highway Trust Fund must be saved. It provides predictable multi-year funding to states so they can plan and construct long-term highway, bridge, and transit projects. So we are in a countdown to a transportation government shutdown, knowing that 70,000 of our bridges are structurally deficient and 50% of our nation's roads are in less than good condition. Thousands of businesses and millions of jobs depend on that trust fund. And already we hear from states who are cutting back, and that will have a domino effect on our economy. 26 states have been identified here where they've already said they're postponing critical projects. I'll give you a couple of examples. In Utah, there's $305 million in federal highway funding at risk, jeopardizing 11,000 jobs, 175 projects. In Nevada, $350 million in federal highway funding at risk, jeopardizing 4,600 jobs and 60 projects. In Kentucky, over $833 million in federal highway funding at risk, jeopardizing 100 projects. The governor has stated many projects may be delayed because of the financial risk. If I go to a bank and say, I want to buy a house and I have really good credit, can I do it? And the banker says, absolutely. What are you thinking about? I say, well, a 15-year mortgage. And he said, well, I can give you a 6-month mortgage. I asked rhetorically, are you going to buy the house? No. Well, are you going to build a road and make those kind of contracts? If you're a state, if you're afraid, you're not going to get the funding. In Idaho, where federal funds make up 68% of the highway capital budget, there's over $275 million at risk, 4,800 jobs. In Georgia, where federal funds make up 76% of their capital highway budget, there's over $1.2 billion in funds at risk. And I could go on. I support the Senate Finance Committee's plan to mark up legislation tomorrow that will keep the Highway Trust Fund solvent through the critical construction season. Their action now is necessary to stave off disaster and I urge my Republican friends on the Finance Committee to join with the Democrats to save the Highway Trust Fund. Here's the deal. If we can do it in this room, if Senator Vitter and I can act as one, and Senator Barrasso and Senator Carper can act as one, and Senator Inhofe and Senator Whitehouse can act as one, and Senator Sessions and Senator Sanders can act as one, and that's just examples of the different political ideologies that came together. Every single committee in this Senate and House can do the same. It's not about us. It's not about ideology. It's about the bread and butter of this country, the meat and potatoes of this economy. And we are on the verge of a transportation government shutdown. Failure is not an option. And today, I am so proud to be joined by an array of business, labor, and transportation organizations. Now, in addition to those I'm going to call on, I want to give you the breadth of support for action here. Here's who's out here, who's not going to speak up here. American Council of Engineering Companies, American Highway Users Alliance, American Public Transportation Association, American Truckers Association, Association of Equipment Manufacturers, Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations, Laborers International Union of North America, National Asphalt Pavement Association, National Association of Truck Stop Operators, National Governors Association, Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association, and the Portland Cement Association. And now speaking, and I will run up here and say the names of each speaker as they come. First is Pete Ruane, a fantastic partner in this effort, President and CEO, American Road and Transportation Builders, Arbita.
Thank you, Chairman Boxer, for inviting us again, and more importantly, for your consistent leadership on this subject. And thank you for not scheduling this press conference tomorrow at noon. This Sunday will be the 58th anniversary of President Eisenhower signing the law to create the Highway Trust Fund to support building the interstate highway system. That same trust fund is now facing its fifth revenue shortfall in the last 7 years. Folks, people need to figure out that this problem is not going away. This problem is not going away. States rely on federal funds for 52% of their highway and bridge capital projects, and you heard the recitation from Chairman Boxer about what's going on in the various states around the country. Those situations, as she noted, means lost jobs, hundreds of thousands of jobs. Now, simply preserving federal highway and transit investment requires Congress to find $16 billion every year. To put that in context, back in 2008, it was $8 billion. So we need to end this cycle of dysfunction, which requires an immediate plan to get through this construction season, as noted, without the threat of a shutdown or delayed federal payments. Then Congress needs to come together with a bipartisan plan to permanently stabilize and grow the Highway Trust Fund's revenue base. Otherwise, folks, it's deja vu all over again. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. You laid it out exactly right. And next, Janet Kavanaugh, Executive Director, Transportation and Infrastructure, U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Hi, Janet.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Boxer, for all that you do. You know, we represent a lot of the groups here in this room today, but fundamentally, what we know is fixing the Highway Trust Fund, passing long-term reauthorization bills is about business and it's about the economy. We've all seen the statistics. We could have brought a stack of reports with us, but what it comes down to is that economic development agency in a community that says, if we do not maintain, modernize, and expand what we have, we can't draw businesses here. It means the port city that says, we need to expand to prepare for the Panama Canal, but if we don't fix our roads and our surface transportation, we can't be a gateway into this country. It means lack of a real strategy. Is it fair that Congress isn't going to do its job? No. And so we're here today to say, Congress, do your job. We know that a lot of people have gone out and they've said, yeah, we're ready to go. Well, we need a bipartisan, bicameral effort to get this done, to fix the Highway Trust Fund before Congress leaves for the August recess so that businesses have the certainty they need to make the investments they need and to employ the people that they need. Thanks.
Janet, thank you. Bud Wright, Executive Director, American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials.
Thank you, Chairman Boxer. Thanks for allowing us to be here, and thank you for your continued leadership on this issue. As the chairman mentioned, last week Secretary Fox sent a letter to all the state DOTs encouraging them to urge Congress to ensure continued solvency of the Highway Trust Fund. If Congress does not act by the end of July, U.S. DOT will delay reimbursements to state DOTs for work on highway projects that are already completed. Delaying reimbursement to states is the equivalent of the federal government defaulting on a commitment. Without reimbursement from U.S. DOT, states will be forced to either pay for the federal portion of the projects out of their own pockets or stop paying contractors at all. Some states, as the chairman mentioned, are already taking preventive action. In March, the Arkansas State Highway and Transportation Department pulled 10 projects totaling $60 million from the list of projects that would have gone forward this summer. Just yesterday, North Carolina DOT announced that failure to ensure the solvency of the Federal Highway Trust Fund puts 108 transportation projects and 20,000 jobs at risk in North Carolina. And on a blog post on US DOT's website this week, Kentucky Governor Steve Beshear wrote that hundreds of millions of dollars of shovel-ready transportation projects could be delayed this summer if the Highway Trust Fund becomes insolvent. We at AASHTO are tracking how states are preparing for the impending Highway Trust Fund crisis in an infographic we developed. We have hard copies here, but information on which projects are at risk in individual states is available in the electronic version of the infographic, which can be found at invest.transportation.org. In summary, the time for Congress to act is now. Congress needs to reach an agreement on how to keep the Highway Trust Fund solvent within the next few weeks and continue to work on a 6-year surface transportation bill that keeps the Highway Trust Fund solvent for the long-term future. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Bud. Sean O'Neill, Director, Associated General Contractors.
Thank you, Senator Boxer, for holding this important press conference. As has been said, the need to act is now. Over 10,000 construction companies engaged in highway, road, and bridge construction would be adversely impacted if Congress does not address the looming crisis facing the Highway Trust Fund. This crisis should come as no surprise to any member of Congress, Republican or Democrat, House or Senate. AGC and our colleagues in the Transportation Construction Coalition have been sounding the Highway Trust Fund alarm for over a year. We've been doing this through emails, personal visits, and fly-ins. This is an issue that is very, very important, obviously, to our members and to the members of the Transportation Construction Coalition. Throughout this process, our message has been clear and consistent. We need bipartisan and bicameral solutions to provide the revenue necessary for both the short term and the long term in the Highway Trust Fund. Our goal is to achieve a robust, multi-year reauthorization of MAP 21. This needs to be something that, again, is done in a bipartisan, bicameral fashion, and we at AGC stand ready to work with Chairman Boxer, Ranking Member Vitter, and other members of the House and Senate to make sure our goals are achieved. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Tom Trotter, Legislative Representative, AFL-CIO.
Thank you, Chairman Boxer. You know, it's kind of unbelievable, actually, that we have to gather here for urgent action on an issue as fundamental as this, the most basic thing government does to fund its infrastructure. And if we can't even find the funds to fund the current levels of investment in our infrastructure, then something is seriously, seriously wrong. So here we are again, shouting from the mountaintop, labor, business, users, builders of our system, saying find the necessary funds, short and long term. I mean, government not finding a way to fund its infrastructure is like a burger joint not finding a way to buy its ground beef, or an auto manufacturer not finding a way to buy its steel. It just doesn't make any sense. An efficient, reliable transportation system is the foundation of our economy. And what we do determines whether we will be creating jobs or eliminating jobs, whether we'll be expanding or contracting our economy, and whether we'll remain globally competitive. So let's be clear. We need a short-term funding patch, and hopefully we'll see some of that tomorrow, and we need to remain focused on a multi-year reauthorization and getting it done by the end of the year. But the clock is ticking. Tick-tock towards the loss of at least 700,000 jobs if we don't act. TikTok towards more congestion, more delays, more failing bridges, more pothole-filled highways, and more transit capacity problems. So TikTok to Congress, and particularly the House leadership, figure it out, resolve the differences, and get it done in a fair and responsible way. The working men and women of this country are counting on it and will be watching.
Thank you, Tom. Now we go from Tom to Tim Waters, National Chairman, Associated Equipment Distributors. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Boxer. We gather here today to ring alarm bells over a crisis that we've been talking about for years. We knew this day was coming, but so many members of Congress have chosen to bury their heads in the sand and pretend there isn't a problem. America's infrastructure is crumbling, and it threatens our position in the world as a global economic leader. They've chosen to deny the obvious truth that the simplest way, and perhaps the only way, to solve the problem is to raise the gas tax and restore solvency to the Highway Trust Fund. Every morning, hundreds of thousands of hardworking men and women in the construction industry go to work and build Americans' transportation infrastructure. If they didn't do their job, this country would come to a grinding halt. I represent some of these hardworking Americans, and it's hard for me to express how disappointed we are with Congress at this moment. We're disappointed that Congress hasn't done its job, and their neglect of this issue has brought the federal highway program to the brink of collapse. A collapse that threatens at least 4,000 jobs in my industry at equipment dealerships around the country and 700,000 jobs in the broader construction industry. That Congress would subject our industry to this sort of catastrophic uncertainty is stunning. The construction industry was hit harder than any other sector through the Great Recession and still has not fully recovered. I can think of nothing worse for this industry than for Congress to sit on its hands and watch as hundreds of thousands of workers continue to sit at home in despair, waiting for their construction jobs to return. While we're disappointed with Congress, Chairman Boxer, we are not disappointed with you. We know that you, Ranking Member Vitter, and the members of the EPW Committee are working hard both sides of the aisle to keep the highway authorization process moving forward and prevent the program from shutting down. But we also know that the work of a small handful of people isn't enough to get the job done. I'm here today on behalf of the men and women of the construction equipment industry from states and districts across the country to ask every member of House and Senate to do your job, do what we've asked you to come here to do, legislate, govern, give us a highway bill, and give us the infrastructure that the U.S. economy needs to function. Chairman Boxer, we're proud to stand with you here today.
Amen. Michael Johnson, President and CEO, National Stone, Sand, and Gravel Association. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Boxer, and thank you to Ranking Member Vetter and the members of your committee for your leadership on this issue. I represent 10,000 operations across this country that produce rocks. And you can't build anything major in this country without rocks. So our interest here is somewhat self-evident. In fact, there are 38,000 tons of the products that my members produce in every 1 mile of 4-lane interstate highway. Not a surprise that we're very concerned about this impasse and this need to get past these short-term fixes for a long-term bill. We're going to redouble our efforts to work with our grassroots to bring non-traditional advocates to the table. We need not just to hear from those of us in this business, but from those of us whose businesses depend upon a good system of infrastructure in this country. There are no Democratic roads. There are no Republican roads. There shouldn't be partisan potholes that keep us from building the number one infrastructure in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Garbini, President, National Ready Mix Concrete Association.
Thank you, Chairman Boxer. I only have 3 points that I want to make. You've heard a lot of statistics already. Point number one is that the longer we delay a fully funded multi-year highway bill, the more it's going to cost and the more disrepair our infrastructure and roads are going to be in. Point number two has already been made as well. This is about jobs. This really is a nonpartisan issue. We need to get this economy even kick-started by having this fully funded multi-year highway bill now. The last point I want to make has to go to across the board for all of the elected officials. This is Congress's responsibility to ensure that the transportation system in this country facilitates commerce, and it's not doing that right now. Thank you.
Right. Casey Dinges, Managing Director for External Affairs, American Society of Civil Engineers.
Thank you, Chairman Boxer, for all your heavy lifting on this and the bipartisan spirit that you're bringing to this issue.
We have 145,000 members in the organization, and by trade, we are problem solvers, faced with critical questions on a daily basis of moving people and goods more efficiently and how we can ensure our communities have safe water to drink. Now our leaders in Washington have a problem to solve. How can we build a foundation for the 21st century economy with a highway trust fund about to go into the red? With a backlog of needed projects across the country, ASCE's infrastructure report card estimates that we will have a total investment shortfall from all sources of almost $900 billion for our roads, bridges, and transit systems by 2020. Kicking this can down the road doesn't save any of us money. Failing to solve this problem is costing every American family and business hundreds of dollars every year right now. ASCE recently did an economic study that found that America's ailing roads and bridges will cost each and every one of you over $1,000 per year if we continue our current investment trends, not even taking into account the drop in funding that we are facing if we don't find a solution. Congested roadways, brutal potholes, trucks idling in traffic, trying to get goods to market all have an impact on our pocketbooks. As we watch the Highway Trust Fund get closer to insolvency, we know there's an opportunity to find a bipartisan solution, but the window is closing before projects will stop across the country at the end of August. We can't afford this downward drag on the economy. Let's once again become a nation of problem solvers instead of waiting for the sky to fall. Let's fix the Highway Trust Fund.
Thank you, Casey. Jeff Soth, Assistant Director, International Union of Operating Engineers, and when Jeff concludes, we'll take questions.
Thank you, Chairman Boxer. It's a pleasure to join my industry colleagues today for the unified call to fix the Highway Trust Fund. The construction industry can ill afford a hit that would be envisioned by ending Highway Trust Fund investments. We're just beginning to struggle out of the Great Recession now. In August 2008 was when we had the lowest unemployment rate we've seen until this most recent May data. 8.6% is the unemployment rate in construction. This is after we soared over 27% unemployment rate in the construction industry in February of 2010. We simply can't afford a self-inflicted wound that would end investments in the Highway Trust Fund and lay off thousands of construction workers, many of whom are operating engineers who are simply looking to build this country's transportation network. Operating engineers are joining the industry call to ask Congress to do its job so that operating engineers can do our job building this nation's transportation infrastructure. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you so much to everybody, and I think you'll all agree. The people behind me here are experts at this, and they get it. And they're not wearing a partisan stripe today. No way. We don't know how they vote. And we don't care. What we're saying today is, America, come together around a very critical and important program that we've had since Dwight Eisenhower had the vision to start a national highway system. And we don't want to see that be disrupted in any way. It's already disrupted enough. So yes, we support a short-term patch to get us through the construction season, and then a 6-year funding source. And I'm happy to take any questions from the press. Just identify where you're from before you ask your question. Yes, sir.
Kevin Robillard, Politico. Would you be okay with a longer-term patch that goes past the lame duck into the next Congress, or do you think really this needs to be something that gets solved during the lame duck?
Needs to get solved, and that's what I've said to all my colleagues on the Finance Committee. Of course, it's going to be up to them. My opinion is, get it done after the election, out of the way, off the plate. Give these people and the millions of people who are involved in this the certainty, and don't put it off, and don't play politics with it. Get the politics out of it. And that's why I think Chairman Wyden has a good plan here. Anybody else have questions? Yes?
With KTVU, how does this really impact your folks back in the Bay Area, the BART system, highway projects?
Huge.
Can you talk about that?
It's huge. I mean, really, almost every single project we do, be it a bridge or a road or a transit system, has federal funding as a component. we know just from the formula alone, California gets about $4 billion. And that doesn't even count the TIFIA project, which is so critical and leverages so many dollars. So everything's at stake for us in California, but I might say every single state has a stake in this. There is no one state that, you know, is carrying more than another. They're all carrying. I want to mention something about the election last night that happened where my colleague, Thad Cochran, won a race. I saw some of the ads that were on television, and they made a very important point, that Senator Cochran has worked to bring money back for Mississippi. His opponent was not interested in that. And I bring this up because I think it's important in the deepest of red states, in the deepest of red primaries, you had someone who made that part of his appeal, that he has worked here to bring funds back to Mississippi. And I'm heartened by that. I'm heartened by that. Because as was stated here, this is a basic responsibility. And I think hopefully that will send a message of courage to my colleagues. Yeah.
Tom Ikniowski, Engineering News Record. Chairman Boxer, do you support the specifics of Senator Wyden's plan, not just that he has one?
I haven't seen all the details, but from what I understand, and I will get back to you if it's different, these were all mechanisms that have been supported widely before to get us through this patch. So at this point, I have no reason to think that there's anything there that should give people pause. Yes, Kitty.
Kitty Feldy with Southern California Public Radio. When we talk about that long-term solution, in 20 years, Congress hasn't had the guts to think about raising the gas tax. I know there's other proposals out there, many equally disliked. What makes you think that as we face this election coming up in November for midterms, that you're going to get congressional support this time for a long-term solution?
Well, we're talking about a patch to get us through the construction season and then taking the 6-year bill and funding it in the lame duck. So I think, A, that avoids the politics of it at the moment, your question, and B, it gives people time to think about, while they're away from the politics, what is the solution they support. Now, I want to say for myself, I've been very open. I'm happy to support a gradual gas tax increase, and it was put forward by a bipartisan team. I want to praise them, Chris Murphy and Senator Corker. This is a big deal that those two came together to put forward the Chamber's plan. I support a plan that would move that tax upstream and do away with the gas tax and replace it with a user tax at the refinery level. I support that idea. I support using repatriation. There's a lot of funding there. I support a combination of all those things. So, you know, I would look at vehicle miles traveled and doing it in a way that doesn't involve putting an intrusive system in your car, but just doing it in a voluntary way, because I've often said, I don't pay enough for the roads because I drive a plug-in hybrid car in California, and I hardly ever go to the gas station. It's not right. So there are many ways that we can move forward so that all the users pay. And so am I optimistic if we can get through the patch? Yes. And I've mentioned why. The biggest reason is standing behind me, Kitty, and people out here. If you want to go through this, these are the pillars of our community, of our business community and our labor community. So I just say anyone who looks them in the eye and says, sorry, I can't help you, is making a big mistake, both on substance and politics. And that's why I wanted to call everyone together today, to say Mayday, Mayday, and look who cares. Yeah.
Luca Gattoni, Tax Notes. Just to kind of follow up on Kitty's
Sure.
question, actually, I talked to some Ways and Means Republicans yesterday, and they called I know you haven't looked at Senator Wyden's plan closely, but they basically called it a non-starter and said that they didn't like the tax increases in it.
Well, there's no tax increases. There's closing
that's
tax
what
loopholes.
I'm just
But
telling
let
you
them
their
come up with
perception.
the-
I'm just all I'm
That's
asking.
their problem. If they don't like it, come up with a plan. Don't just ding somebody else. Come up with a plan. The last plan they had was Eric Cantor's great idea, which was to stop postal delivery 1 day a week to save the program for 3 months. Absurd. And it was the first time in my life I ever agreed with the Heritage Foundation when they said, brilliant, take one bankrupt fund and throw money into another bankrupt fund. Ridiculous. So here's my point. If the House Ways and Means Committee doesn't approve of the work that Ron Wyden has done, good for them. Let them come up with their plan. Let's look at it. Let's work together. Don't just stand there and throw a hand grenade at someone who's doing their job. They're sleeping over there.
The only question I wanted to ask was, what do you see?
I'm sorry, I did do a kill the messenger thing, and I'm really sorry.
Well, I didn't say it. I don't have any opinions up here. My question is, what do you see?
You're an American who drives on our road.
I'm also a reporter. What do you see as?
Oh.
What do you see as a realistic, feasible, bipartisan, bicameral solution to this problem in the short term? Because I think the vehicle miles traveled has some support, but
I'll say it again. Ways and Means, sit down, and find a solution to get us through. A solution that doesn't hurt other jobs, that doesn't destroy other things, and get us through. We do it here at the Senate Finance Committee, just like we did our job in this room, come together, and we work it out. That's what. I'm not going to tell them what to do. I'm going to say, don't come up with a plan that's nonsensical, like stopping postal deliveries. And by the way, it would have kept us going for 3 months. And people are looking like, what are you talking about? Anyway, yes.
Become involved in this issue, apart from Secretary Fox warning about the potential impact of a trust fund shortfall?
Well, I think it's important that Secretary Fox do what he did, sending out those letters and telling people, we just want you to know. Now, they have come out for a solution using tax reform. That's their solution.
Have they done anything to actually advance that? They have not, to my knowledge, introduced a legislative proposal.
Talked to a lot of people. They've put out a lot of paper on tax reform. The issue, as I see it, is a lot of folks believe that they can't do tax reform right now because there's so many issues outstanding. They want to find a patch till December. But I think their idea, tax reform, could well be part of the solution in the long run. Anybody else have questions? Yes, sir.
Mike Bowman, Voice of America.
Yeah.
I'm wondering from members of the business community what your message would be to those who oppose any revenue enhancements under any circumstances for any purpose.
Constitutionally.
We really believe that there are certain things that government bears some responsibility for, and that you actually have to pay for those things. Tom Donahue has been saying for a long time we need to have a straightforward, honest discussion about how we pay for infrastructure. We solidly believe that the federal government bears some responsibility for infrastructure. It's about knitting this country's economy together. It's about interstate commerce. It's about international trade. It's about economic development. So for people who say we shouldn't have revenues for anything at all, they don't seem to understand the fundamental responsibilities of government to provide for some public goods.
Here's what I say. Get out of your Stone Age cave and join the real world of what's going on with this economy. That's what I say to people who have that point of view.
Don't hold back.
I would say $1 trillion in GDP and 900,000 jobs by 2020 at risk.
Anybody else?
Yes.
Add your voices.
And I'd like to, there's definitely a difference between, there's different types of spending. And, there's spending and then there's investing. And spending in our infrastructure is an investment in ourselves, in our nation, in our own economy. And that type of spending is always welcome. Where we're not spending, we're investing.
Anybody else want to comment?
I kind of spoke over, I'll say it again. It's constitutionally responsible for this Congress to do this. This is a first order of business kind of thing, so it's got to be done.
And I'd just like to add, similar along, what are you spending the money on? Sometimes not spending money is not saving money. If you have a leaky roof in your house, not fixing it is not going to save you any money in the long run. And it's the same thing with our infrastructure. It's an investment that pays dividends in the future, whether it's growing the economy, putting people back to work, and keeping us globally competitive.
So I'm going to close this and say this. We need to get a message out today, and we thank all of you who've come to help us get that message out. We are facing a transportation government shutdown. We are Republicans, we are Democrats, we are Americans. We are together. That is wrong. Each subcommittee, each committee of the House and Senate have the job to do. It's not my job to tell the House how to deal with it. It is my job to work with my committee and put out a bill, and we did it. We did it. A 6-year bill. It is so not extravagant. It builds on the TIFIA program. It builds on the successes and the reforms we've had in the past, and it gives certainty to our states that they will have the basic dollar amounts that they've gotten plus inflation for 6 years. I will say this. Senator Inhofe and I are very good friends, and you know that when it comes to the environment, this little discussion I had with this reporter is like a picnic compared to the way we feel about each other when it comes to the environment. There's just no commonality. But when it comes to the infrastructure, I, coming from a very liberal, progressive place, and Jim coming from a very conservative place, agree that it is a basic function of the government. And not to do it is a basic failure of the government. And failure is not an option, and we thank you very much for coming.